go with him when he would go away to work. She would go stay with him in the motel rooms and, just try to keep an eye on him. He was working a job in Chester, Virginia, and his wife hadn't gone on that trip and she hadn't heard from him for several days. Fearing the worst, because she knew he battled addiction issues and alcohol problems, she just knew something was wrong, jumped in the car, and drove to the motel where he was staying. For her to drive from Albany, Georgia, up to Chester, Virginia, that's not an easy trip.
Well, that's a pretty good trip.
That's like half a day or so. To go that far, she had to be concerned. When she finds him in the motel room, he's with two other men that he works with, Pete DeWitt and Waldo Parnell. The three had been using drugs for days. They were basically on, what do you want to say, a bender?
Yeah.
A bender?
Yeah.
Sharon was really angry, as you can imagine, and she left him there.
Well, I can imagine their face when she come popping through the door. Never expected her to come popping in on their party.
He eventually returned home in an attempt to make up with his wife. Now, he told her he had sworn off drugs, he wasn't going to do them again, and that he'd had this big falling out with DeWitt and Parnell. They owed him money, and he was not going to be sharing a room with them again. He seemed pretty upset with these guys.
Well, maybe he's had enough of it.
With the help of his wife, he did get clean. He stopped using drugs. A doctor had told him that he had liver cirrhosis, and he knew it was a death warrant if he continued drinking heavily. He cut back on the drinking, but he didn't stop completely, but he did stop using drugs, and he really seemed to mean it. He had quit using and was functioning pretty well. By September of 1991, Sharon and his daughters were concerned because he wanted to take another job with B.E.&K Construction, which was out of town. He had been doing well with recovery, and they felt like being away from home and maybe around the influence of those coworkers was not the best choice. They seemed to influence him negatively.
Well, yeah, if you're...
The peer pressure, being out of town.
Well, not having any accountability to the ones you love, and I'm sure she was helping keep him in line, if you will. And, that's just not a good idea for anyone struggling with addiction.
But Thomas needed to make some money. He took a job at what then was known as Champion International Paper, located in Canton, North Carolina.
Hey, I've heard of that place.
Are you familiar with this paper mill, Dylan?
I am.
Well, the paper mill would be doing a 30-day shutdown.
Yeah, they call that a cold mill. So there's a lot of projects going on. They bring a lot of outside contractors in, different crews. So, yeah, this makes total sense.
So, what kinds of things might they be doing?
Just major projects that take more than just a half a day or a day because the entire place is shut down. It allows them to do some big capital projects, as they call them. I don't know anything specific, but...
Okay, so this is like a big deal.
Oh, it's a big deal. Millions of dollars tied up, planned for years. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Okay, so Thomas coming to the paper mill, going to do some work, probably make a good chunk of change.
He's going to make some good money. They're going to be working long hours. Yeah, get everything done in time.
Now, Sharon agreed that Thomas could take the job under the premise that she was going to drive up to this covered wagon motel where he would be staying on the weekends so she could be with him. Kind of allowed her to keep an eye on him, make sure he didn't get into any trouble, but it also kept him from just being lonely.
Yeah, well, that'd be nice to have your wife come up every weekend.
It's hard to be away on those jobs for weeks or months at a time, and especially when you have family, when you've got a wife at home, kids at home, a husband at home. You'd rather be spending time with them than holed up in some motel room in a strange town.
Yeah, and that's a little bit closer to her, Maggie Valley to Albany, Georgia, a lot closer, a little easier drive for her.
On the weekend of October 20th, 1991, the job was ending, and Sharon decided she was going to stay home. Thomas had a few loose ends to tie up in town, like pick up his last paycheck, he had to settle up on his room, all that stuff, but planning to come home soon. Now, I'm sure after working hard all week, as you mentioned, those long hours, doing these big jobs, the last thing he wanted to do was pack up that vehicle on Friday and head home. He probably wanted to give himself maybe a day to sleep in, rest up. He had to pack up all of his stuff. You're out of town for weeks at a time. I'm sure you've got quite a bit of stuff with you.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the drive back to Albany is about, I'm going to guess 5.5 or 6 hours from Waynesville.
Wow.
So that's a pretty good drive. So I'm guessing he probably wanted to rest up, pack up, and then, take a day to drive.
Right.
But 2 days later, he would be dead.
My gosh.
Now, when his body was found in the motel room, the responding deputy assumed he had died of natural causes. The deputy noted a few blood drops leading from the bathroom to the bed in the motel room. He was found on the floor in a prone position, and the mattress had partially, been pulled down, almost kind of on him. There were no signs of a struggle. The motel owner had gotten a call for Thomas at the desk, and I believe it was Sharon calling because she wasn't reaching him in the room. She was concerned. That's when his body was discovered on the floor. He had blood in his mouth and nose. A doctor named James Milling had been called to the scene, reported he believed it was a suspicious death. Now, he told the deputy he believed Harden died of strangulation, but authorities did not immediately treat the case as a homicide.
Well, that doesn't make sense.
Now, here's small town for you. Dr. Milling was my papa's doctor.
Ah.
I believe they were fishing buddies as well. That's what you get in a small town, right?
Yeah, but you got the small town doctor is like, yeah, I think this is not natural causes, and I think this man appears to have been strangled.
Yeah, exactly.
But the investigating deputies knew better because they haven't been trained at all in that stuff. That makes sense.
Haywood County Sheriff at the time, a man named Tom Alexander,
Oh, yeah.
said there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry, so he did not suspect foul play. Investigators would wait for an autopsy report. Well, the autopsy performed the following day showed that Harden had died from hemorrhaging and fracturing of the larynx. The pathologist agreed with Dr. Milling's initial findings that Harden had died from an injury consistent with strangulation, calling it a very violent, unnatural death.
Okay, so now the sheriff's department is going to be like, okay, we have a murder, and that's how they're going to treat it, right?
Well, the sheriff's office sat down with the family and explained they had 3 doctors showing the death as consistent with strangulation, but they were not ruling out the death was from natural causes.
That doesn't make sense.
Investigators pointed out that Harden had a history of drug and alcohol abuse, suggesting perhaps he had committed suicide. Now, Dr. Thompson, who was one of the doctors that examined Harden, said it was impossible for a person to commit suicide by strangling themselves.
Yeah, because you pass out and you have to continue to strangle after you pass out to kill some.
The sheriff's office released a statement at the time to the local newspaper stating, "We have no suspects, we have no motive, we have no opportunity. We'd love to solve this case and put it to rest, but we just don't have anything right now."
I don't think they're looking for anything.
Then the case goes cold.
Okay.
But a few pieces of evidence surfaced that seemed to go unnoticed. It was reported by the motel owner that 2 men had in fact been staying in Harden's room before the murder. Now, if you remember, Harden had a fight with those guys, Pete and Waldo, 2 co-workers while he was in Virginia, and he said that they owed him money. Sharon found a hairbrush and a bottle of shampoo in Thomas's Waynesville motel room that belonged to these 2 men, and she recognized it as having belonged to those men because they had stayed together in Virginia, and she had been there, and she had seen the brand of shampoo and this particular hairbrush that she knew did not belong to her husband.
Hey.
The brand was the same exact hairbrush, probably had the men's hair in the brush.
Wow. There's some evidence.
Well, at the time, the deputy who was over the case, a guy named Jim Parton, told Sharon and Renee that unless they had names, phone numbers, or more information on those 2 men, then the sheriff's office couldn't really investigate them.
Isn't that what you do? Isn't that what the word investigate means? To find out that information?
Well, isn't that like what they're being paid to do? I didn't know it was like the family's job to be responsible for.
They're the cops. They're to investigate, the lead investigator on the case. And I'm telling you that I know someone likely was in the room with him. The man at the hotel who runs it, I saw 2 men in there. Just because the door's not kicked in and the lamp's knocked over, do you have to have that for it to be a murder? I don't get that. I know you look for, but there's no forced entry because they were in the room. They was cool with each other to a degree. And then something happened.
Well, Sharon had also found a crumpled up DUI that Thomas had been issued while he was in North Carolina. And she told the sheriff's office about it, but they said they had no record of this DUI. They couldn't find anything about it. Sharon also found an aluminum baseball bat in Thomas's truck after the murder. The bat didn't belong to him. Sharon thought it was strange, but threw it away. Well, later on, Renee and Sharon asked the medical examiner if Thomas's injuries, like the crushing of the larynx, that had to take some force, like a blunt force trauma. Could that have been done, like if you were hit with a baseball bat, or if someone took a baseball bat and put it at your throat and pushed down,
Oh.
And Dr. Thompson said, yes, absolutely, the injury had come from blunt force trauma to the throat, and that would have been a very good or logical explanation.
Oh my gosh.
Now, there was blood found on Harden's shirt and on the bed, but it was not tested. So who knows if it matched Thomas's DNA profile or if it was someone else's. Also, his pocket knife was missing. There is a theory that perhaps maybe he tried to fight off the attacker, maybe even stabbed them with his pocket knife.
Yeah.
And that's where those drops of blood came from. And then the pocket knife was taken.
See, he has personal items. A working man like that, his pocket knife is with him at all times, 24/7. He lays it beside him, and then when he goes to bed, empties his pockets with his wallet, and it goes right back in his pockets when he gets up in the morning. Guarantee it.
Well, after all, the investigators said it didn't appear to be a homicide. But my question is, and I'm no medical expert, but if a person has a heart attack and dies, is it common for there to be random blood drops around the deceased?
Well, if a person has a heart attack and dies, when the medical examiners that look at the body back up that conclusion that, it looks like they died from a heart attack. They don't say, wow, it looks like this man was strangled. This looks like a homicide. They don't say that. How they don't give any merit to what the experts are saying, and I don't understand why they're doing that.
Another strange element is that Thomas's shirt had a piece of chewing gum on it, and that gum was never tested. Had it been in Harden's mouth and, maybe when he was attacked, spit it out, or did it belong to someone else who maybe spat it out on him after they killed him?
Or it fell out of their mouth while
this person's killed him and they're basically like, here's a fuck you, and spit their gum out on him. Or
it falls out of their mouth literally because he was a good sized man. He wasn't a little guy, so it probably was not easy to do what they did to him.
I mean, I'm just speculating here.
Yeah, but hey,
if I were an investigator,
here's a wad of DNA.
I have this mind that goes in these different directions that, hey, we need to figure out who belongs to this gum.
I just don't see who sees this scene and it's like, oh, it just looks totally normal. He probably killed himself.
Well, when the family starts pressing for more information and bringing to the attention of law enforcement that there are these various clues, evidence, could you look into these things? Detectives end up offering up this theory that Harden had gone to a bar in Asheville, had a fight, returned to his room, and died. There was little evidence to support this theory. It was based on the fact that there was a membership card from a bar in Asheville found in Harden's room. I mean, if that's the case and something happens to me, they're probably going to find 30 private membership club cards for different bars in Asheville. Please don't let them assume that that's what I was doing today if I end up dead.
He'd been there for weeks working. There's no telling because I'm sure they didn't go to the bar and ask any damn questions, I'm going to guess.
Have you seen this man?
Was he here that last night, the night before? Do you know anything? They didn't do that, I'm going to guess.
Well, and there were even reports where, I think the motel owner had said he had seen him the night before they found him, come back at 9:30 that night or something. So probably not time for him to get off work, go to the bar, come back. Well, Thomas's daughter, Renee, she is not going to give up. She spent years hounding the Haywood County Sheriff's Office while maintaining meticulous notes about the investigation, and I know because I have had my hands on copies of these notes.
Wow.
She has detailed phone conversations, she has copies of emails, letters, notations, who said what time they said it, the date. Yeah, her notes are very thorough. Sharon Harden sent a letter to Unsolved Mysteries, hoping that her husband's story might become a show segment, which could spark new interest in the case. The state medical examiner had actually referred Renee to the state's attorney general, but when she contacted them, they told her that their office couldn't really step in to help with the case unless Sheriff Alexander asked them to do so.
Huh. Yeah, we Okay. But it didn't